All right, welcome everybody. My name is Teresa Cooney. I'm an associate professor at Howard Community College in beautiful Columbia, Maryland, where all the cherry blossoms are in full bloom this week. I'm also a member of the OADN Simulation Committee member. So on the behalf of OADN and Unbound Medicine, we are pleased to have you join us for today for Unpacking AI Ethics, a panel discussion on navigating the future for nurse educators. And it's facilitated by our OADN Simulation Committee. Another aspect of our OADN Simulation Committee is for nurse education simulists to review virtual simulation products for their alignment with healthcare simulation standards of best practice. These reviews are offered at a no cost via an online database hosted by our partners at Unbound Medicine. And you can find that link on OADN's website. So we do have a disclaimer before we start today. We are not AI experts, right? We are nursing educators and nursing simulationists, and we're experts, and that we care to share our experience about AI and our thoughts on how to use it. You'll likely hear us mention some specific AI products, but I want you to know that it's not an endorsement for any one particular AI product or platform. We will talk about ChatGPT and other associated products specifically because they offer some functionality that we haven't found in other platforms. There are also so many products that are coming to fruition right now that we do encourage you to get out there and practice with them until you find the one that you're most comfortable with. This conversation is one of several amongst this group, and we're going to be exploring AI with nursing education. Please hold questions until the end or put it in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of today's session. In fact, you may find that you may have more questions than answers by the time we finish our time together of this hour. So we are here to stir your thoughts and engage your creativity and trigger your imagination for the potential use of AI. If we don't have time to get to all of your answers during this webinar, we will take note of them and we'll cover them in for future workshops or webinars, or we'll answer it on our VSR site or via email. So our objectives for today, because we are nursing educators, right? Our student learning objectives. All right, we're going to explore how AI-generated case scenarios can complement rather than replace faculty expertise in simulation while ensuring alignment with nursing competencies and evidence-based practice. Then we'll discuss ethical considerations in AI-supported simulations, including potential bias in AI-generated content and the importance of transparency in debriefing and feedback. We'll identify strategies for integrating AI into simulation while maintaining faculty oversight, clinical judgment, and decision-making skills. So now I'd like to hand it off to Janeen Berndt to begin our introductions.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Welcome, everyone. I'm Janeen Berndt, and I'm the Senior Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Galen College of Nursing. I also have the wonderful opportunity to co-chair the OADN Simulation Committee, and we're so happy that you're here to join us today. And also, we hope that you'll join us on future webinars and events. And we have some future events that we'll announce at the end. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our wonderful panelists here today. I'll start with Elizabeth Robison. Dr. Robison is a certified healthcare simulation educator advanced with the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, as well as a certified nurse educator with the NLN. She currently co-chairs the simulation committee with me and is now an independent consultant working with nursing programs both stateside and internationally. She's presented at small workshops on using generative AI in nursing curriculum, specifically focused on using it to build case studies for interactive classroom activities. She's also worked with an international group incorporating generative AI into building simulation scenarios. She created a podcast called Dr. Liz on Podbean that's generated by AI and is for nurse educators with deep dive discussions that include AI articles from peer-reviewed nursing journals. Next, we have Courtney McNulty. Courtney is the Content Solution Manager at Unbound Medicine, where she focuses on integrating generative AI into nursing education. Next is Corinne Harrell. Corinne has been in nursing since 2003, with 17 years as a registered nurse, serving the geriatric adult population in progressive care units. She obtained her master's degree in nursing education from Grand Canyon University in October 2013. Corinne has worked as a nurse educator in both the academic and hospital settings for 11 years, accumulating 11 years of simulation experience in that time. Corinne currently works at Phoenix College Nursing as a simulation coordinator for the program and holds certification as a certified healthcare simulation educator. Next is Tammy Schwab. Dr. Schwab is a certified healthcare simulation educator with the Society for Simulation in Healthcare and the National League for Nursing Sim Leader with 15 years of simulation education experience. She's a professor and simulation director at Carroll Community College in Westminster, Maryland. In this role, she's a member of the college-wide AI task force and has presented on AI during college-wide faculty development meetings. She is currently developing a series of one-hour advising sessions for her undergraduate nursing students on the use of AI tools for each level of Bloom's taxonomy to more effectively study and learn course content. Next is Diane Bradley. Diane, a registered nurse for over 39 years, holds a BSN and MS in exercise physiology from West Virginia University and an MS in nursing education from Walden University. Her clinical background spans various medical surgical units, cardiac rehab, acute inpatient rehab, home health, and hospice. A Delaware Technical Community College instructor since 2007, she's been involved with simulation since 2009, spurred by an NLN scholarship. Currently, she participates in all campus simulation activities and is a certified nurse educator and certified healthcare simulation educator. And finally, Deborah Lord. Deborah Lord is an ADN instructor at Delaware Technical Community College, overseeing the sim lab since 2011. She holds an ADN from Wesley College, a BSN from Wilmington University, an MSN FNP, and has completed 6 doctoral level nursing courses. Her nursing background includes adult, neonatal, and pediatric care. As a certified simulation educator, she's passionate about simulation's positive impact on patient care and is dedicated to fostering the next generation of nurses by enriching their education and building a strong foundation for their careers. So prior to joining us today, we sent out a survey and asked you all to please participate in the survey so we could get to know our audience a little bit. I wanted to share some of that data with you today. First of all, we asked you to rate your knowledge of AI, and about 59% of you indicated that your level of knowledge is between a 3 and a 4. So you're not quite absolute beginners, and yet you're also not experts like our panelists here. Another interesting piece is that we asked how you learn about AI technology. 65% of you indicated that you learn about AI technology from your colleagues, and 70% of you indicated that you learn about AI from webinars. And we're hopeful that this webinar you will add to that list of sources that you're learning about AI. 71% of you indicated that you're not currently using AI in your simulation practice. And those of you who are using it, 66% of you are using it primarily for scenario development. And you'll hear some discussion about that and other ways that you might use it in your simulation practice today as well. The most common platforms that were mentioned in the survey were the ChatGPT platform and Perplexity. You'll hear more about especially the ChatGPT platforms. But as Teresa mentioned, we're not endorsing any of the platforms, but we did want to make a note that ChatGPT is a collection of platforms. And you'll hear, especially Dr. Robinson, talk about how if she uses various forms of the ChatGPT platform, it will return different results. So I think you'll find that interesting today in the discussion. We also asked you what benefits you've identified in using AI in your simulation practice. And in order of most frequent, you indicated that benefits were increased efficiency in scenario development, and we'll have some discussion about that today, increasing realism or conceptual fidelity, improved student engagement, and finally, a better feedback mechanism. And then finally, your concerns around adopting AI in your simulation practice. Again, in order of frequency, 54% of you were concerned about potential biases that are present in AI generated content. And we'll have some discussion about that today. Ethical concerns was 52%, and that's also part of our discussion today. And we also have a previous webinar, the one that was just prior to this. We talked about ethical considerations with using AI in nursing education in general, and that's available on our website, and we'll have a link for that for you before the end of the webinar today. 50% of you were concerned about the impact of using AI on student learning outcomes. And 48% of you were concerned about the lack of faculty oversight when using AI. And all of these, fortunately, we're pleased to know that your top ranked concerns are all things that we're going to address today in the webinar. So with that, Teresa, I'm going to hand it back over to you to get us started.
So let's dive into our content. Our first topic will be about enhancing and not replacing educator expertise. Liz will start us off with how to ensure AI simulations align with student learning outcomes and evidence-based practice. And then Tammy will follow, discussing the differences between AI-generated simulation scenarios versus faculty-created scenarios. So let's start our discussion with Liz.
Thank you, Teresa. Let's start this discussion by recognizing how AI can assist simulation and still follow guidance provided by the Healthcare Simulation Standards of Best Practice from ONAXL. Hopefully, if you're involved in simulation, you're quite aware of these standards as they guide us in terms of best practice. There are 9 standards, but within our committee work, when we're looking at virtual simulation products, the standard of simulation design encompasses many of the aspects within the other standards. That design one includes, aspects of pre-briefing and debriefing. One of the first areas to consider in simulation is ensuring your activity aligns with the student learning outcomes and supports evidence-based practice. AI tools can assist with these aspects within the designing process or even updating your scenario. Key to providing authentic output is how the prompt is generated. And I'm not going to go into the details. We're going to have another person talk about prompt design. But in other words, how best is it to communicate with that tool for the desired output? At the OADN convention last year, we had a group of us that actually presented a workshop focusing on the use of generative AI. And the group in my section, we were working with several educators on using a prompt developed product to assist with designing a well-developed scenario. I really developed the prompts for this activity, but it wasn't a one and done. It took me several iterations to develop well-designed prompts based on what I thought would provide authentic output. My techniques in doing this is kind of trial and error approach, but also I ran into a great article, and we'll put the source for that article in the chat, that talks about kind of a checklist approach. As nurses, we like checklists. So I found it very nice to have something to look at to see that my prompt was well designed. In the interim, believe it or not, I found a great generative AI product that allowed me to further refine the prompts I initially designed. So you can see over time, you may even further refine prompts that you may use on an ongoing basis. I'm not going to go a lot of detail because Courtney and her team will address that a little bit more. But we use the NLN simulation design template to guide this process. Also, very good to have some sort of template, especially if you're in a program that your scenarios are being designed with. We felt the simulation design template by the NLN which aligned well with the standards was best to use, because it is well known out there. Tammy will now discuss more on the use of AI-generated case scenarios versus faculty-developed content and provide more details on the work we did with simulation design using the AI tools in the NLN template.
Thanks, Liz. As Liz just mentioned, during the fall OADN convention, we used specific prompts that she had created based on each section of the NLN template to trial as a way of developing a sim scenario. The presenters for this part of the workshop each pilot tested the prompts before we presented using at least 2 different Gen AI products just to see what kind of outputs were produced. And then we kind of, as a team, compared our results. We just have to note that this was back in the fall. So, you know, with the way AI is evolving so rapidly, our findings today might even be different. Some of the themes I discovered when we did this exercise were that several of the Gen AI products gave highly variable outputs, while some things were very similar. One similarity occurred with the description of the patient prompt. So that's that first part of the template. And our prompt kind of stated, I'm creating a simulation scenario for pre-licensure second semester nursing students, and I want to use the NLN Sim Design Template version February 2023. And the scenario will be an inpatient admitted with COPD exacerbation, because that was the scenario I chose. And then it said, I need the following information to complete the brief description of the patient area. And then I listed those items: name, date of birth, weight, racial group, etc. All those items included in that section of the template. So when I asked for a COPD case, the different products all gave me the same gender, the same year of birth, race, employment status, meta-allergies, and comorbidities, which really surprised me that they were all identical. And it made me wonder if there was some inherent bias that I should watch out for, as we don't want our students to always assume that all COPD patients are 75-year-old white males, etc., as we know this would limit their thinking. When I reflected on this, the same thing probably occurs. I think we know it occurs with faculty-generated cases. Stereotypes are just part of human nature, but we know they limit our thinking and lead to blind spots and errors. So as faculty simulation experts, you know, you really have to critically review your output to decide what you intend for your students based on your learning outcomes. You know, as we talked about this, we thought, you know, you could modify your prompt after an input like this by asking for more uncommon or non-stereotypical patient demographics, or use these as alternative scenarios to discuss with students during your debrief. One example of a variance I discovered was that when entering the psychomotor and cognitive skills prompts in the section where you're creating your pre-brief or sim prep activities, that Microsoft Copilot seemed to be more nursing focused, while ChatGPT was more of a medical model of management. I found that I essentially needed to kind of give my own activities or heavily modify the output given just to make it work for my scenario objectives to fully prepare my students for the experience. When I completed the progression outline section, I found that both of my AI outputs missed several key nursing student actions I felt would be critical to include. And I could give you many more details, but I think what I found but I thought it'd be better to give you some overall takeaways of what I learned. And that would be that AI really can't replace an experienced sim educator who needs to critically review and modify those outputs to fit with the NACSL healthcare simulation standards of best practice to meet our students' needs. AI is a great starting point. It gets your creative juices flowing. It can save you time and energy in many instances, but you really need to review and modify to make sure everything is appropriate. My second big takeaway is that just as we do this for ourselves, we really need to model it and teach it to our students who are heavily using AI for their work, and most likely will be as future practitioners also. And finally, any new sim session you create should be reviewed and vetted by content experts to assure your content validity. And this is a standard of best practice along with pilot testing of your new scenarios with students. So I think it can be reassuring that we feel expert faculty still have a huge role in this and that AI does not replace us.
Thank you so much, Tammy. That is such a great conversation and a reminder that as simulationists, it's important for us to keep in mind the learning objectives as well as the experiential fidelity, including the conceptual fidelity. So those are really good points. And great examples of how we can leverage AI to design our simulation experiences. So let's spend the next several minutes exploring ethical considerations that you all mentioned on the pre-webinar survey. I am going to hand it off to Debbie first. I would like to hear your thoughts on using the Simulationist Code of Ethics and how that applies to AI.
Sure, Janeen. Hello, everyone. The Simulation Code of Ethics highlights 6 core values. Today, I will focus on 3 of them: integrity, transparency, and professionalism. I will discuss the direct correlation between these 3 values and the utilization of AI in simulation. Please note that I am referencing a learning resource from a previous OADN convention workshop from Liz. Let's start with integrity. This core value includes promoting honesty, truthfulness, fairness, and judgment in all aspects of fulfilling the role as a healthcare simulation expert. As experts have suggested that sim centers consider developing policy and procedures to disclose AI utilization within the simulation activity design. This ensures awareness to all stakeholders. Integrity also includes the promotion of privacy. This could be problematic due to the fact that output information is biased on patterns related to historical algorithms. Diane will discuss this later on in the presentation. The next core value is transparency, which is essential for better outcomes for the user and learner. Being transparent with your simulation design and limitations of the utilization of AI is part of stakeholder awareness that is necessary. Transparency helps build a trusting relationship with stakeholders if one understands how the process works. Understanding limitations promotes the need for identification of errors and leads to continuous improvement to avoid misinformation and repetition of errors. Transparency aids in the elimination of bias and unethical practices through continual monitoring and identification of ethical concerns. Another point regarding transparency is the inclusion of all team members in the policymaking process for the use of AI in SIM-based activities. This inclusion process helps to promote adherence to ethical guidelines, legal aspects, and standards of best practice. And last, let's discuss the importance of professionalism when using AI, an AI tool in simulation. It is the nurse educator's responsibility to consider equity and justice when inputting prompts. According to the ANA position paper on the ethical use of AI in nursing practice, incorrect use of profiling algorithms could lead to discrimination and negative effects on the output generated by AI. The same concept can be applied to AI in simulation. The data generated from AI is based on past input information and profiling algorithms. The algorithm being utilized needs to be carefully reviewed for justice and fairness to avoid the promotion of incorrect biased clinical decisions made by the learner. A simulationist should also consider the biased profile algorithms can lead to student learning incorrect information and creating an image that all patients are treated in the same fashion despite different backgrounds. Through respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the development of AI-generated simulations, we are promoting best practices. Another component of this core value is the promotion and encouragement of faculty development regarding the use of AI in simulation. A way to do so is to hold faculty development opportunities for faculty to stay with the most up-to-date information and practices with AI usage and sim development. This education should also include advantages and limitations of AI utilization in sim design. Perhaps your academic institution has courses that are readily available and developed by experts at your own institution. And lastly, I think it's important for nurse educators to understand that they are not being replaced by AI in simulation, which has already been mentioned a few times during this discussion. However, with collaborating with this learning resource, your student learning outcomes most definitely could be improved. Now, Diane will discuss the importance of evaluating AI output.
Thank you, Deb. As Deb mentioned, output information from generative AI is based on patterns related to historical algorithms. These algorithms are developed from machine learning of large data sets, which can produce misinformation or hallucinations. So it is important for the nurse educator to evaluate AI output to ensure it aligns with the Healthcare Simulationist Code of Ethics and meets the objectives for the simulation-based learning experience. This can be done systematically by reviewing common AI output areas of concern. An important area to evaluate is the fairness of the output. As you review the output, you want to make sure it treats all individuals equitably and does not discriminate against certain groups or individuals. Another area to evaluate is copyright infringement. You should get a source from your AI output. You should have the source. If you do not get that source, you may consider not possibly using that information. This is an area we are concerned about copyright infringement because it's machine learning using large data sets. Transparency is another area of concern. How the output was determined should be understandable and explainable, allowing users to understand how decisions were made to create it. Output should be evaluated to make sure there are no violations of human rights to privacy, security, and freedom of expression. All AI output should be checked at regular intervals, as mentioned previously, and any violations to the Healthcare Code of Ethics should be addressed immediately. Courtney will now discuss the important topic of inherent bias within AI.
Thank you, Diane. So far, this conversation has just been great. I'm thinking about my notes and what I was going to touch on, and so much that has already been said will probably sound repeated here, but that's a good thing because educators, such as yourselves, right, you're used to having to repeat yourselves before students can get the concept. So that's kind of what we're flowing into as well. And so keeping in mind the code of ethics and how that plays into inherent bias in generative AI, it's all items that you as educators, as simulationists, deal with on a daily basis. When you're creating scenarios, when you're working with students, you're trying to avoid your own inherent bias, even if you're not aware that it's going out there, right? As Tammy mentioned, we're human. We all have inherent biases. So you do your best to prevent that from seeping into your students so that they can have their own perspective, but also understand the importance of seeing other perspectives. So with generative AI, and again, as Tammy mentioned, using the two different models, so Copilot versus ChatGPT, and seeing what the outputs were, these models are trained from humans inputting information. Yes, they're trained off of the internet as well, but that is all information that humans created and entered. So these models are learning off of that. They are learning from you. They are learning from your students, from what is being put in. So being conscientious of not including copyrighted information so that others don't have to worry about that copyrighted information being an output. You want to make sure that anything you would do in a classroom setting, that you are going to mimic that in the input that you are giving to this generative AI. Copilot might have had more of a nursing focus because majority of nursing institutions I've spoken with are using Copilot. Just think about that for a moment, about how that might be affecting that output or biases, whereas ChatGPT might be a little more focused on the medical side. So helping to train these models and make sure that you have policies in place, that you're being transparent about the use, about the fact that there is going to be a bias. And this goes back to not being able to replace that nurse educator. You are the instrument to helping identify and prevent these biases from continuing. You can go back into the generative AI and say, hey, this is biased. Let's try it with this lens. And by acknowledging these limitations of the technologies, and this is just the beginning of generative AI, so it's going to continue to expand, to improve. And the more that we help identify those biases right off the bat, the better they will get. And a big part of being able to help with that is by prompt design. And I know Liz touched on it and mentioned how it was not a one and done. And that is going to continue to be the case because, again, the human component is so important. So making sure that your prompts are thoughtful, that they are encouraging inclusivity, representation of diverse populations, that maybe they're coming from a different lens of the area that you're in. So if you're in Florida versus Alaska, maybe you want to say, okay, give me a patient that would typically appear in a clinical setting in South Florida because I'm up in middle of nowhere, Alaska. And you can have AI revamp your prompts as well. So you can say, rewrite this, but you can also, again, try them against one another, see what the outputs are, and then say, let's redo this prompt. Let's design this in a better way so that then when you are leading into these discussions and debriefing and reflecting with students, you're in a position that you have all of your ducks in a row. And Diane is actually going to touch more on that debriefing component of how all of this that we've discussed is going to go into play there as well.
Thank you, Courtney. As Courtney mentioned, AI can facilitate feedback and reflection that can occur throughout the simulation-based experience. Before I discuss the different examples of feedback that can be provided, I want to mention that it's crucial that everyone involved in the simulation experience, that's the learner, any staff or faculty, is informed in advance that generative AI is used for feedback and debriefing. You want to maintain that transparency that we've talked about, because that transparency promotes a trusting relationship with those involved with the simulation activities. It provides the psychological safety, and it promotes, a safe learning experience for everyone involved. As mentioned, the AI feedback may be provided in multiple ways. The simulation itself could have, be a robot that provides real-time feedback to the learner as the simulation-based experience is unfolding. This allows the learner to make immediate adjustments and promotes deeper insights, which may improve critical thinking. This personalized feedback can help identify key areas for improvement and foster a deeper reflection, thus enhancing clinical judgment skills. The simulation-based experience may be recorded, and AI can analyze the student's motions and conversation to provide feedback via a report. AI feedback could occur with virtual simulations. Virtual reality can be screen-based or immersive with headsets. During a virtual simulation, an avatar could be used on a computer and exhibit symptoms and interact with students in real time. The feedback would be specific to that student, and the system can adapt to the student's performance to create a tailored learning experience, thus accommodating to the student's best learning method. The AI generated feedback I have been discussing tends to be more objective performance feedback based on what parameters a nurse educator would place within the computerized program. Feedback provided without using AI has an increased potential to be subjective due to that inherent bias from an instructor. Deb has an example of how to incorporate feedback with AI following a simulation.
Thanks, Diane. So what I did was I used it from a different point of view, and I created a scenario of an asthma scenario where a student was to instruct their patient on how to use an inhaler. So what I did was, and I said, thought, well, I noted that the student had difficulties with this teaching during the simulation. So I apologize in advance, but I did use a very long prompt. And my prompt was, what feedback should a nurse educator give nursing students after a simulation regarding asthma and the use of an inhaler when noted that the student demonstrated a lack of understanding when giving verbal instructions to a patient? I noted that this feedback that was generated included a focus on the specific issue of the student not understanding how to give the instruction to the patient, but the feedback was also non-judgmental, and it gave examples to make the student aware and gave potential suggestions for how the student could improve. So here's an example. I'm going to let you know the example of the feedback that I received. When explaining the inhaler technique to the student, I noticed that some key steps were missed, like demonstrating how to shake the inhaler before use and instructing the patient on how to breathe and in slowly after activating it. This is critical to ensure the medication is effectively delivered. Another statement that was generated was a way to clarify the actual missteps. It generated the following statement. The patient seemed unsure about whether to breathe in deeply or whether to hold their breath after using the inhaler. These details are important for ensuring the proper use of the inhaler. Part of the feedback also encouraged the student to follow step-by-step instructions which were listed. These instructions would need to be evaluated, obviously, for accuracy, but you get the idea. AI also encouraged the student to do a demonstration and utilize the teach-back method, which I really liked. A disadvantage that I noted was that it did not utilize a debriefing model for best practices. I agree with the feedback and feel the suggestions are appropriate. However, I felt it did not provide critical thinking by the student. Therefore, the instructor still needs to provide feedback to ensure discovery by the student. Teresa?
Thank you, Deb. Wow, we really learned a lot about how to evaluate the AI output for code of ethics alignment, how to identify the AI generated biases, and how to use strong design prompts and best ways to understand how to use AI for debriefing. So thank you for sharing your expertise. So Liz, I'd like to move the conversation to you. What types of strategies can be incorporated into AI while maintaining clinical judgment and decision-making skills for our faculty?
Thanks, Teresa. I'd like to showcase this with an activity. We talked about debriefing, and there's a standard now, pre-briefing. That was one of the new standards with the latest release, and pre-briefing is preparation and the briefing component for the healthcare simulation standards of best practice. This is an innovative approach in using AI, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. This is an AI tool called Notebook, and I'm going to just bring that down real quick and then bring it into my Heartfield. You see, I use it quite a bit. This is a Google product. So this is a generative tool that's a Google product. And you may have heard about this through other forums. It is a very innovative tool, both for educators as well as students. So this is a innovative process to use as a preparatory activity. Plus, what I like about this particular platform, and you can see my sources here, it allows me to direct the knowledge of the tool. In other words, the information that's generated comes from these 18 sources that I have populated. The didactic portion for a classroom activity for heart failure is really where I pulled many of these sources from, but I wanted to update my content with current information. So you can see I have a lot of 2024 information on heart failure. There's a lot of things that have been in the medical information, and all these articles are open access articles. I try to include that when I'm including uploads into generative AI tools. And so this particular piece here generates a very synopsis of that information. And over to the right, you'll see the audio overview. And so what happened here is that I ask it with a specific prompt to generate information as a preparatory activity for learners. It's only 18 minutes long, well within the time frame that I think our learners will allow themselves to spend in the audio portion of it. And it goes over important key points to prepare for the simulation activity. It pulls from all these sources, and it pulls from information that I had requested it to pull from. Additionally, I ask it to provide a guide, and you'll see here, it may be small on your screen, a particular comprehensive study guide that can be used by facilitators to craft some Socratic questions. Plus, it provided a glossary of terms. A lot of times when we're doing heart failure simulation, there's a lot of new terminology, especially if our students haven't gone and worked in a clinical environment that had a lot of cardiac patients. I'm from Florida. It's a high case type in our area, so it's something that we really focus on in terms of case types. I took this information and made it as a student handout, so they had that information available. Plus, you may have a facilitator that has to step in that doesn't have a strong cardiac background. You can give them a basic understanding of like a briefing document that provides them information about heart failure, or give that to your learners as well. The other thing that is new to this particular product, it wasn't when I developed the audio piece, is this function called mind mapping. And so I'm going to open up the one I previously had and look at how wonderful this particular area is with this product here. It really goes into some detail. It truly does provide an opportunity for an interactive activity, even in classroom, outside of simulation, that kind of gives a more of a mind map approach to this particular disease process. If you want to listen to the output that I have with this, I do have that on my Podbean podcast as something that I posted as a way for an interactive activity. And Teresa will put that link within the chat for you if you're interested in that. But this is just a way you can source information to make sure it's using evidence-based practice, it's clinically relevant. It allows the students to have a different way to prepare for simulation in terms of a pre-briefing approach. Plus, you can use it a variety of other ways for your learners.
So it looks like we're now going to talk to Corinne.
Yes, thank you. So at my campus, we've actually been using AI in a few different ways within our simulations, and we're actually using them during simulation. One way is incorporating pictures and images. So the EHR system that we have has the ability to put in a picture. And as everyone knows, you've probably got 50,000 simulations throughout your program. So we've been using our Canva product. I do pay for it just because of the copyright component. I can put that in a reference that I generated the image for this patient based off of our demographics that we have in our scenario from my Canva. So because there is built in for that. And there are so many different image generators out there. Explore, find which ones you like the best. There are free ones. So, but then I add those into our EHR. So when they're pulling up their EHR, they have a picture as well for their patient. Those images are sometimes put onto the mannequins as well so that they can do that conceptual piece where they're matching those patients up. And then we also add them into our chatbots, which is the second way we are using AI within the actual simulation space. Because communication is one of our biggest things that we work on, right? It's one of the things we do the most. But when you're running multiple beds, so in our lab, we might have 10 students with one instructor. So they're running through the scenario, the mannequin's on, it has all the sounds and things, but you don't get the spoken interaction. So we've started playing with chatbots where we program the bot to be the patient so they can actually ask it questions. So what is your name? What is your birthday? Have you had any problems, medical issues? Do you have allergies? All of the questions we ask. So, and we are starting to use that, and it responds as if it's the patient. So, and so far our students are really enjoying that aspect of it and knowing that they're also having to figure out different ways to ask questions, because the chatbot will answer like a person and go, I don't know what you mean. Can you please explain again? Or can you ask that another way? So they are having to think about how they are communicating with their patient. Now, this is something that is new. So one of the biggest important pieces that we have put into place, and that has been mentioned before, is that transparency. So during our pre-briefings for all of these, we let them know these are AI generated components, especially the chatbots, because they are interacting with that one. It's not just a picture. And that we had to program that, and there could be things that could come up because it is something that we are learning. We do have to learn that programming, and it learns that generative iteration within the chatbot. Things can come up a little different than you expected. Maybe they asked a question that you didn't prompt it. So it's just going to respond in however it thinks that patient might respond. So if there's things during that simulation, they can pull that, ask the instructor. So we let them know ahead of time. And there have been lessons learned. I forgot to tell the chatbot what its birthday was in our first run. So the patient didn't know his birthday and it was wrong. So the students caught it. It was fabulous. And then we used it as a learning opportunity of what would you do if maybe your patient doesn't know? Something else could be going on. So, but we're very transparent in the fact that they were AI and it wasn't going to probably be perfect, but we were trying it. So now we're getting better at it. The students keep asking for more, so they are really appreciating that piece. And we've started working on incorporating AI within our online case studies. So we have them do some things before they come to sim. So we're building our case studies and using an image generator that also creates a video with your script to embed patients talking so that they can have a little bit more interaction even when they're on the screen, or the nurse actually giving them the report within that screen-based case study. So, and I have used, I do use a couple different generators depending on what I'm using, but there are free versions and then there are paid versions. So the biggest thing is really to get in and play with the different generators to figure out which one's going to work best for you. Some are a little easier. So one I've been using is Zapier, you can just put in information, but if you want to pull, say, your scenario or the documents you have to pay for it. So there's different levels, just like with everything. And that's just one of them. There are so many out there. So have fun, explore, and play. And then we also have Miss Tammy has a couple different examples of how she's been using AI within her school.
Thanks, Corinne. I have an example that's more for general nursing education, although it kind of intersects with simulation. But at my college, we do mandatory weekly intrusive group advising sessions. And I'm kind of the person responsible for developing topics, typically on stress management, burnout, study, test taking, brain-based learning. And knowing, because we survey our students a lot, and we know that a majority of our students are using AI to study, I felt it was really important to guide them in kind of the ethical, effective use of it. So I created 2 sessions so far that I've rolled out with students on using Gen AI as a tool to study more effectively. Part 1 really focused kind of on just the general stuff, general tips, identifying different tools, because they pretty much only know about the Snapchat AI or Chat GPT. Ethical use and our policy statements that we came up with as a kind of a curricular group. And then part 2 that I just rolled out a few weeks ago was focused on study strategies and ideas kind of based on each level of Bloom's taxonomy. So I gave I gave ideas of how to study at each level, and for each of those ideas, I gave an example prompt. And, we had them practice like putting it in and just comparing and seeing what they got. Really, my big goals with it were to help them study better, and hopefully to teach them how to move up the pyramid and really study deeper. They all want to just do NCLEX style questions to study or reread their notes. And we know that typically is not effective. They're just memorizing that specific scenario or test example. So, it's really reminding them how to move through the levels, get to higher and deeper learning, and then sparking some creative ideas, because as they trialed and errored using the prompts and thinking about the study ideas, they started kind of coming up with their own prompt ideas. So, and it also really helped the faculty as the feedback that I got. They got some good ideas for active learning strategies, maybe in the classroom. So, I think it's really important to kind of guide our students who are delving into this AI world. And it intersects a little bit with SIM, because obviously SIM, is one of the strategies that I included on this sheet, because even pre-AI days, we used to always recommend, for those highest levels of learning, when you're creating, to create a SIM scenario is really one of the highest forms of studying. They have to put all their knowledge and skill together to create this scenario case. So now they can just use AI as a tool to help them in that process. And then another practical idea, we use Gen AI a lot now for many things, but another thing that I kind of was looking for some creative ideas, maybe I was kind of stuck, is creating what if scenarios. So, we use the debriefing for meaningful learning method at my college as our debrief method. And obviously the last stage of debrief is the extend thinking, where we ask what if scenarios or what if questions. So in February, we just ran our multi-patient simulation. And I thought, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT to give me some what if questions. So my prompt, I kind of put in what the scenario was and what the objectives were. And then I asked for these what ifs. And so with this one very, succinct prompt, it gave me 2 pages, 30 different what if questions and scenarios, and even some guidance on how to use them. And one example of a what if question it gave me was, what if 2 of the bedside nurses had called in sick, leaving only 1 RN, the charge RN, and the nursing assistant? How would you reassign those tasks and ensure patient safety? So that's just one example, and it gave me several. I think this is, again, back to the other idea I just said, a great way for students to study. We know they get stuck in their box and we need to extend their thinking. So what if questions are a great study strategy that we encourage our students to use so that they move away from memorizing those specific cases, to really work with the content in new and different ways to strengthen their knowledge and skill at a much deeper level. So you could encourage really your own students to ask Gen AI to create these what if scenarios to consider as they study.
All right. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Tammy. So
Thanks.
we are nearly at time for our webinar. Every time we do one of these, it goes so fast and it's over before we know it. I hope that you all have gotten some practical examples of how you might use AI in your simulation. I almost said generative AI, but we're starting to include more than just generative AI in our discussions. So just AI in general in your simulation practice. I did put a link in the chat. Our simulation committee that several of the presenters you see here and some others are presenting a pre-conference workshop at the 2025 Anaxel conference that's coming up in Denver on Thursday, June 19th. Our pre-conference is from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And the title of our pre-conference is From Pre-Brief to Debrief Using AI to Elevate the Simulation Standards. Our primary focus will be using AI to support your efforts either toward endorsement or endorsement renewal. So I encourage you, if you're going to be at an Axel, come join our workshop. We look forward to having you there. And then Teresa also posted a link in the chat for the OADN convention, which is November 20th through the 22nd in Orlando, Florida. And we are currently accepting abstracts for that. So if you would like to present, please be sure and submit your abstract and keep an eye on the website for when registration begins. For that. Our committee usually does some kind of work for that as well. I'm sure that we will have some presentations there on AI. So thank you all so much. I think that we have captured all of the questions that were posed in the Q&A and or in the chat, but stay tuned. We will have more offerings that are coming up in the future.